steht in Tracht, Tracht in Tracht, a ganze Nacht. Wenn sie nehmen, ihn nicht verschämen, wenn sie nehmen, ihn nicht verschämen. Tumbala, 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 laika, tumbala, 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 laika, tumbala, laika, spiel balalaika, tumbala, laika, fröhlich soll sein. Mädel, oi Mädel, ich will bei dir fragen, was kann wachsen, wachsen und regen? Sag, was kann brennen, nee, nicht erfahren, was kann bänken, weinen und trägen? Tumbala, 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 laika, tumbala, 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 laika, tumbala, laika, spiel balalaika.
In World War II, the Jews were massacred in an event known as the Holocaust. When the Allies won, the British agreed to cede land for the Jews to create their own nation, namely in the Holy Land, Judea. Jews all over the world left for the Holy Land to form their own nation. However, the land is habituated by Palestinians, which has made Judea their homeland for centuries. So, with NATO support, Israel wrested control of the land and named it Israel. Israel successfully defeated all of its Muslim neighbors and started to encroach upon the land. As Jews entered the country, Palestinians left their homeland for the other Muslim nations.
Let's look at the facts. So, how did it all begin? In May 1948, the local Arab population was joined by 7 Arab countries in a collective attempt to destroy the newly re-established Jewish state. Encouraged by Arab leaders who promised they would return as victors, and later on, as a result of their failed war efforts, an estimated 500,000 Arabs fled to neighboring Arab territories. But is this the full picture? I'd like you to take a look at the refugees in these photos. Many people assume they are Arab refugees, fleeing Israel. But in fact, they are innocent Jewish refugees forced out of Arab countries. This map tells the full story. There were far more Jewish refugees than Arab refugees. Over 850,000 Jews from ancient Jewish communities predating Islam and the Arab occupation of the Middle East were forced out of their homes. Jews were stripped of their citizenship in many countries, and their property was confiscated. In contrast, 160,000 Arabs accepted Israel's offer to remain, and today there are more than 1 million Israeli Arab citizens with full equal rights living in Israel. Now, here is a question. Have you heard of any Jewish refugee camps? I didn't think so. The Jewish refugees were immediately welcomed and absorbed by Israel or by other nations. Then why, after more than 60 years, are the Arab-Palestinian refugees still not welcomed and absorbed among their own brethren? And how could their numbers have grown from 500,000 to 4.7 million? The sad reality is that the Arab refugees never had a chance. Attempts at resettlement were blocked by a variety of discriminatory laws enacted in Arab countries, such as a ban on receiving citizenship, with the exception of Jordan, blocking them from entering many professions, restrictions on owning land, restrictions on movement, and a denial of education and health services. Sir Alexander Galloway, a former director of the UN Refugee Agency in Jordan, gave the reason for this discrimination. Quote, "The Arab nations do not want to solve the Arab refugee problem. They want to keep it as an open sore, as a weapon against Israel." Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser explained the effect of this weapon, aimed at overwhelming Israel demographically, with generations of refugees cultivated to hate. Quote, "If the refugees return to Israel, Israel will cease to exist." And what role did the United Nations play? Sadly, they were less than helpful.
Shalom al Israel.
Between the Nazi rise to power in 1933 and Nazi Germany's surrender in 1945, more than 2,400,000 to 3 million Jews emigrated from European countries. 800,000 to 1 million Jews left, fled, or were expelled from their homes in Arab countries from 1948 until the early 1970s. Approximately 600,000 to 700,000 of Jewish refugees flooded into Israel, and were largely housed in temporary transition camps, called Mabara. Persecution, anti-Semitism, political instability, insecurity, expulsion, evacuation, rise of Arab nationalism. The Jews lost their homes. After the war, most of the infrastructure in Central and Eastern Europe were destroyed, and most of the cities are bombed to the ground. Without any property or belonging, they decided to leave for a new homeland. The Jews were mistreated. Many Jews were prosecuted and killed by the Axis, and after the war the hatred and fear still ran deep. They decided to run away from the place they once called home. It was their new homeland. For many centuries, the Jews have been expelled from their homeland, and became a homeless race, like gypsies. This new nation is their own country, and Jews migrated there to help create their home state. Nationalism. As the only Jewish state in the world, Jews migrated to Israel, their own nation. Upon their arrival in Palestine, the group had to wait several years until land for settlement was made available, and they worked as hired laborers in the meanwhile. Families lived in small shacks of cloth, tin, or wood, no larger than 10 to 15 square meters each. Other shacks housed the basic services, kindergarten, school, infirmary, small grocery store, employment office, synagogue, etc. The living quarters were not connected to either water or electric systems. Running water was available from central faucets, but it had to be boiled before drinking. The public showers and lavatories were generally inadequate and often in disrepair. A paucity of teachers and educational resources severely hindered the attempts to provide the camp children with suitable education. Work, even relief work, was not always available. The desire to fulfill Zionist yearnings, better economic, secure home. Disadvantages. Loses a lot of its overgrown population, reducing the pressure on weak economy. Population structures altered, giving a fragile social life. Is a great deal of income to their economy. Fall under dictatorships. Discourage any form of tourism, foreign income, investors, or even international aids. Advantages. Released pressure from services, jobs, and the economy. Tend to cleanse unwanted groups of people out of country. Government have a bigger chance in staying in power to rule the country. Decreased population. Disadvantages. Strain on the country's resources. Increased unemployment. Need to provide housing, food, medical care, education, services. Increase racial tension, violence and discrimination. Provide safety for refugees from their own government's persecution. Relations between both countries and the pressure produced by governments on their neighboring countries, financial aid or economic relations, form an international pressure through organizations. Face violent attacks from opposition forces. Low quality, overcrowded housing lacking in basic amenities, inner city slums. Advantages. Extra source of labor. cultural exchange, bring new skills and ideas. Stable employment with a salary, meeting new people and broadening their cultural understanding.
בירושלים ולא ילמדו עוד מלחמה